Well, hello there. Today on this video, I'm going to tell you about 6 places on the Oregon coast near Astoria that you may not have heard of. We found that these places were well worth visiting, so let's get into it. Astoria is located about 2 hours northwest of Portland on the south bank of the mouth of the Columbia River, about 5 miles east of the ocean. The first interesting place on the Oregon coast that you may not be aware of is Cape Disappointment. Less than 30 minutes from Astoria, just across the amazing Astoria Bridge. The bridge is 4 miles long and it provides 200-foot clearance at high tide. Cape Disappointment is a state park in southwestern Washington State, which offers 8 trails which have beautiful views and provide good hiking opportunities. Cape Disappointment also has 2 lighthouses because of Cape Disappointment's track record for sinking ships. The United States Coast Guard is very active on the Coast Guard station on the north bank of the Columbia River. If you're lucky, you might observe a Coast Guard training exercise like we did when we were hiking on the Lighthouse Trail near the cliffs. Looking south from the coastal lighthouse, you can view in the distance a long beach that ends at the Columbia River North Jetty. Looking north from the coastal lighthouse, you observe waves crashing on the rocky, cliffy coast below the lighthouse, of course with the purpose of the lighthouse being to steer the boats away from the coastline. Beside the 6 trails in the south part of the park, there are 2 additional trails in the north. One of those trails is called number 7, named Bell's View Interpretive Trail, which leads to a deck overlooking the cliff north of the coastal lighthouse. Which affords an expansive view of the ocean and the coastline looking to the north. The next interesting place on the Oregon coast near Astoria that you may not have heard of is the Astoria Column. This is a 125-foot tall column which has impressed upon the outer surface of the column a number of historical developments. Since Lewis and Clark's historic visit in 1805, which has affected the area. The events are beautifully rendered and it's well worth a visit. It sits upon a hill on the southeast side of Astoria, and the views at the 125-foot tall tower are quite remarkable. You can easily see Saddle Mountain 15 miles south and many other sites in the area. The next interesting place on the Oregon coast near Astoria that you may not have heard of is the Lewis and Clark National Historical Park. The park is located about 3 miles as the crow flies from Astoria, south on the US 101, just a few miles. Follow the signs. We all learned about Lewis and Clark's historic trip through the untamed wilderness of the Louisiana Purchase lands from 1804 through 1806, and this park is the physical grounds where these explorers wintered over in the winter of 1805-1806. The National Historical Park has an extensive collection of artifacts, documents, pictures, graphics, and information in the visitor center about the Lewis and Clark expedition more than 200 years ago. They boated up a tributary of the Columbia a short distance and built Fort Clatsop. On the grounds of the park, there is a replica of Fort Clatsop on the approximate site of the original fort. It was built using period methods and materials to resemble closely the historical descriptions and accounts on record. These records describe the place where the Lewis and Clark Expeditionary Force spent the winter of 1805-1806. There is also a full-sized replica boat of the riverboat built to transport the explorers up the Missouri River as far as they could go in that large of a boat before the river became so shallow that they had to use canoes. The next interesting place on the Oregon coast near Astoria that you may not have heard of is Fort Stevens State Park. Fort Stevens State Park is located on the northwesternmost beach in the state of Oregon, just south of the South Jetty of the Columbia River. It's a short drive to the west from Astoria on US 101. On the beach, there is the steel wreckage of the steel sailing boat named the Peter Iredale. The Peter Iredale was blown ashore in an extreme northwest Pacific windstorm. Being a sailing boat, it was close to shore. It was no doubt harder to control in the extreme high winds. The sailing boat was attempting to enter the Columbia River and sail up the river. All that remains is some of the structural steel members of the boat's frame, which jut out of the sands. The park is named after the fort, which was located on the grounds of the park before it became a park. You can see the concrete remains of the old fort, whose purpose was to defend the entrance of the Columbia River. And it's interesting to walk around and look at the facilities that remain. At the north end of the beach, there is a viewing deck built for the purpose to inspect the South Jetty. However, you have the additional benefit that you can generally admire the beach to the south and the mouth of the Columbia River. The next interesting place on the Oregon coast near Astoria that you may not have heard of is the Columbia River Maritime Museum. Located on the south bank of the Columbia River on the east side of Astoria is the Maritime Museum. Because the lower Columbia is a very rich estuary which feeds a large fishing industry in the Astoria area, much of the museum is dedicated to the fishing industry. Featured in the museum are the people, boats, methods, materials, and information about the lives and history of these fishermen and the fishing industry. Fishing methods are explored in exhibits showing the different types of boats and tools which were used, such as fishing nets, fishing lines, sinkers, floats, and specialized tools which the fishermen used. Because of the extreme winter weather and the large number of fishermen and boats which were involved in the fishing industry near Astoria, there was the need for an active and well-funded Coast Guard installation nearby to help protect and rescue the hunters and gatherers of the fishing community there. With the extreme weather which blows down from the storms in the Northwest Pacific, winds can sometimes reach in excess of 150 miles an hour, which can produce enormous waves and very dangerous conditions. The museum discusses the problems of the fishermen and the weather present, and how there have been many ships and fishermen lost to the dangerous waters near the mouth of the Columbia River. Coast Guard boats, personnel, and methods employed to help rescue and save fishermen are described, and often boats are available to view on site at the museum and explore, while these Coast Guard boats are there in port during periods of sunny weather where fishermen are unlikely to need rescuing, and the Coast Guard is unlikely to be called out on missions. The next interesting place on the Oregon coast near Astoria that you may not have heard of is Astoria Sunday Market. Astoria has a great farmers market every Sunday from May through October, offering street vendors selling food, farmers' goods, crafts, and flowers on display under tents on 12th Street. After shopping and walking up and down 12th Street, you can go over to the 14th Street Cafe and Coffee Shop in the hotel and enjoy a nice lunch or a cup of coffee and a pastry. And these are the 6 amazing things to see near Astoria, Oregon.